The Valari research vessel Gentle Current floated quietly through the purple clouds of the Andromeda Nebula. It was a small ship, built for science and not for war. The hull was smooth and white, shaped like a teardrop, with large windows that let the crew watch the beautiful colors of space drift by. Commander Thylas stood at the main viewport, her long fingers pressed against the cold glass. She was tall and thin, like all Valari, with skin covered in tiny scales that shifted between blue and silver depending on her mood. Right now, they were a calm shade of pale blue. She had been studying the mineral deposits on the small moon below for 3 cycles, and the work was almost complete. "Commander, the samples from the southern crater are ready for analysis," said researcher Coven from his station. He was young, barely past his growth phase, and this was his first mission away from the homeworld. Thylas turned and gave him a gentle nod. "Excellent work, Coven. We will begin the final test tomorrow and then return home." The crew of 12 scientists moved about their tasks with quiet efficiency. They were not warriors or explorers. They were researchers who wanted nothing more than to study rocks and gases and write reports that other Valari would read in comfortable libraries. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and the Valari had always preferred to observe, rather than interfere. None of them noticed the 3 dark shapes that dropped out of hyperspace behind a nearby asteroid field. Navigator Saley was the first to see the warning lights flash across her console. Her scales immediately turned a dark shade of gray, the color of fear among her people. "Commander," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "we have contacts. 3 vessels approaching at high speed." Thylas moved quickly to the navigation station. Her scales shifted to match Saley's gray as she read the sensor data. The ships were large and angular, covered in sharp edges and weapon ports. She recognized the design immediately. Every spacefaring species knew those ships. Craxians. "All hands, emergency stations," Thylas announced through the ship's communication system. Her voice was calm, but her hearts were beating fast inside her chest. "Navigator, plot a course for the nearest relay station. Maximum speed." "Already done, Commander," Saley replied. "But they are faster than us. They will catch us before we can jump to hyperspace." The Craxians were the monsters of the galaxy. They were large beings, standing nearly 3 meters tall, with thick gray skin and 4 arms that ended in clawed hands. They did not build or create or study. They took. They raided ships, captured crews, and sold them as slaves to the highest bidder. The Galactic Council had tried to stop them for centuries, but the Craxians were strong and their territory was vast. "They are hailing us," said Communications Officer Delin. Her scales were almost black with terror. Thylas closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of her family back home, of the gardens where she had played as a child, of the old professor who had inspired her to study the stars. Then she opened her eyes and straightened her spine. "Put them through." The main screen flickered to life, showing a Craxian face. The creature was massive, with small red eyes and a mouth full of jagged teeth. Scars covered his face, each one a trophy from some past violence. "Valari vessel," the Craxian growled. "I am Warlord Drex. You will shut down your engines and prepare for boarding. Any resistance will be punished with death." "We are a research vessel," Thylas said. "We carry no cargo of value. We are scientists, nothing more." Drex laughed, a horrible sound like metal scraping against stone. "Scientists sell well in the markets of Krath, young ones especially. Shut down your engines now, or we will destroy your ship and take whoever survives." The screen went dark. Thylas looked around at her crew. Coven was trembling, his scales flashing between gray and white. Saley had tears running down her face. Delin was holding herself, rocking back and forth in her chair. These were not soldiers. They had never faced violence in their lives. "Commander, what do we do?" Coven asked. Thylus did not have an answer. The Valari had no weapons, no defenses. They had always relied on the peace of the galaxy to protect them. But the galaxy was not peaceful in places like this, far from the trade routes and the eyes of the Council. Then she remembered something. 3 months ago, the Valari had made contact with a new species. They came from a planet called Earth, a world that other species whispered about in fear. The planet was a Class 12 Deathworld, where the gravity crushed bones and the atmosphere burned lungs. The creatures that lived there were dangerous beyond measure. But when Thylus had met them, they had not seemed dangerous. They had seemed kind. The human ambassador, a female named Patricia Walsh, had given Thylus a small communication device before they parted ways. "If you ever need help," Patricia had said, "use this. We will come." Thylus had thought it was just a polite gesture, the kind of thing diplomats say without meaning. But now, with Craxian ships closing in and her crew crying around her, she pulled the device from her pocket and stared at it. "They are jamming our communications," Saley said. "We cannot reach the Council or any nearby stations." "What about narrow-band frequencies?" Thylus asked. "Something that might slip through their jamming?" Saley checked her console. "Perhaps. If we use a very specific frequency, we might get a short message out. But it would have to be very short. Just a few words." Thylus activated the human device. It showed her a frequency number, different from anything the Valari used. She handed it to Saley. "Try this." Saley entered the frequency. The console flickered, then stabilized. "I have a connection, but it is weak. You have maybe 10 seconds before they detect it and shut it down." Thylus leaned toward the microphone. She had learned a few words of the human language during their brief meeting. Simple words. Basic words. "Help," she said into the microphone. "Please help." Then the connection went dead. The Craxian ship surrounded the gentle current. Thylus could hear the sound of cutting tools against the outer hull. They were coming through the airlock. "Everyone, stay calm," she told her crew, even though her own scales were dark with fear. "Stay together. Do not fight them. Perhaps someone heard us." She did not really believe it. Earth was far away, and humans were new to this part of space. No one would come for 12 Valari scientists in an empty nebula. No one ever came. But Thylus held onto the small communication device and whispered a prayer to the old gods of her people. And somewhere, far across the darkness of space, a light began to blink on a human console. Lieutenant Commander Katie Barnes was having a bad morning. The coffee machine on the patrol frigate Resolute had broken again, and she was trying to fix it with a wrench and some creative cursing when the alarm on her console started beeping. She put down the wrench and walked over to her station, still thinking about coffee. The Resolute was a small ship, not much bigger than a cargo hauler, with a crew of 48 humans. They had been patrolling the outer edges of human-controlled space for 6 weeks, and nothing interesting had happened the entire time. Then Katie saw the signal on her screen, and she forgot all about Coffee Dot. It was a Priority 1 emergency beacon. The frequency was one that only a handful of aliens in the entire galaxy had access to. The Valari diplomatic frequency. And the message attached to it was just one word, spoken in broken English by a voice filled with fear. "Help." Katie ran to the bridge. Captain Nathan Cole was sitting in his chair, reading reports on his datapad like he did every morning. He was an older man, somewhere in his 50s, with gray hair at his temples and calm brown eyes that had seen 3 wars and countless battles. Nothing surprised him anymore. "Captain," Katie said, slightly out of breath, "we have a Priority 1 distress signal. Valari origin. Coordinates are in the Andrus Nebula." Cole put down his datapad. His eyes narrowed. The Andromeda Nebula? That is Craxian territory. Yes, sir. Cole was quiet for a moment. The Valari were one of the few species that had treated humans with respect when they first ventured into space. Most aliens looked at humans with fear or disgust, calling them Deathworlders and monsters. The Valari had looked at them with curiosity and kindness. They had shared knowledge and offered friendship when no one else would. How far? Cole asked. 6 hours at maximum burn, sir. Navigation, plot a course. Engineering, I want everything you can give me. We are going to push this ship until the engines melt, if we have to. The bridge crew jumped into action. Katie watched them with a mixture of pride and worry. The Resolute was a patrol frigate, not a warship. If they went up against Craxian raiders, they would be outgunned, and Cole seemed to read her thoughts. He picked up the communication device on his chair and switched it to the human fleet frequency. This is Captain Nathan Cole of the Resolute to all human vessels in range. We have received a Priority 1 distress signal from a Valari ship in the Andromeda Nebula. The Valari are under attack by Craxian raiders. I am requesting any available assistance. The Valari are our friends. We do not leave our friends behind. He put down the device and looked at Katie. Now we wait and see who answers. They did not have to wait long. The first response came from the heavy cruiser Iron Thunder, commanded by Lisa Grant. She was a legend in the fleet. A woman who had fought in the Mars Rebellion and the Border Wars and had never lost a battle. Her voice crackled through the speakers, calm and steady. Resolute, this is Iron Thunder. We are changing course to intercept. We will be there. The second response came from the destroyer Nightfall, captained by Marcus Webb. Webb was younger than Grant, but just as famous. He had a reputation for taking impossible risks and somehow always winning. Some people said he was lucky. Others said he was crazy. Most said he was both. Resolute Nightfall here. Would not miss this for anything. Craxians need a lesson in manners. More responses followed. The patrol ships vigilant and steadfast. The escort frigate Hammer. The medical ship Mercy, whose captain insisted on coming even though his ship had no weapons. Even a civilian cargo hauler called the Lucky Strike, whose owner had mounted mining lasers on the hull and said he was looking for some excitement. 11 ships in total. 11 human vessels, crewed by humans from Earth and Mars and the colonies scattered across a dozen worlds. All of them changing course, pushing their engines to dangerous levels, racing toward a single distress call from a species they had only recently met. Katie felt something warm spread through her chest. It was pride. Pride in her people, in her species, in what it meant to be human. Sir, she said to Cole, may I ask you something? Go ahead. Why are we doing this? The Valari are not our people. We have no treaty that requires us to help them. The Craxians are dangerous, and we could be flying into a trap. Why risk everything for one small ship? Cole was quiet for a long moment. He looked out the viewport at the stars streaking past as the ship accelerated. Because they asked for help, he said finally. That is the only reason we need. He turned to face her, and there was something in his eyes that Katie had never seen before. Something fierce and ancient, like a fire that had been burning since humans first crawled out of caves and looked up at the stars. We come from a world that tried to kill us every single day, Cole said. Everything on Earth is dangerous. The weather, the animals, the diseases, even the plants. We survived because we learned to work together. We learned that when someone calls for help, you answer. Always. No matter what. He looked back at the stars. The galaxy thinks we are monsters because we come from a death world. They are afraid of us because we are strong and fast and hard to kill. But that is not what makes us human. What makes us human is that we protect the weak. We stand up for those who cannot stand for themselves. We answer when someone calls for help. Katie nodded slowly. She understood now. This was not about politics or treaties or strategic advantage. This was about something deeper. Something that was written into human bones and blood. The Valari are our friends, Cole said. And we do not abandon our friends. Not ever. Not for any reason. The Craxians will learn that today. The Resolute shot through space like a bullet, its engines burning hot, and its crew preparing for battle. Behind it, 10 more ships followed, each one carrying humans, who had heard a call for help and answered without hesitation. The galaxy was about to learn something important about the Deathworlders from Earth. They were not just dangerous. They were loyal. And there was nothing more dangerous than a human protecting someone they cared about. The Craxians had made a terrible mistake. They just did not know it yet. Warlord Drex was having a wonderful day. His soldiers had taken the Valari ship without any trouble at all. The weak little creatures had not even tried to fight back. They had just stood there, shaking and crying, as his warriors dragged them out of their hiding places. Now the 12 Valari scientists were kneeling in the cargo hold of his flagship, their thin arms bound behind their backs. Drex walked among them, examining each one like a farmer checking livestock at market. 2 of them were young, barely adults by Valari standards. Young ones always sold for the highest prices. The others were older, but still healthy enough to fetch decent money. A good catch, Drex said to his second-in-command, a scarred female named Krath. We will make excellent profit from this raid. Krath nodded, her forearms crossed over her chest. The slavers on Vorn Station will pay well. Should we take the ship too? Drex looked at the Valari vessel through the viewport. It was a pretty thing, all smooth curves and clean lines. Not useful for combat, but it might sell to collectors who liked exotic spacecraft. Yes, tow it with us. Strip anything valuable first. He turned back to his prisoners. The one who seemed to be their leader, a tall female with blue-silver scales, was staring at him with an expression he could not read. She did not look as afraid as the others. There was something in her eyes that bothered him. You are their commander? Drex asked, crouching down to her level. I am Commander Thylus, she replied. Her voice was steady, which surprised him. Tell me, Commander Thylus, did you really think that pathetic distress signal would save you? We have been jamming communications since we arrived. No one heard your cry for help. Thylus said nothing. She just kept looking at him with those strange, calm eyes. Drex laughed and stood up. Valari were known for being peaceful to the point of stupidity. This one was probably just too scared to show proper fear. He had seen it before. Some prey animals froze instead of running. Take them to the holding cells, he ordered. We leave for Vorn Station in 1 hour. His soldiers began dragging the prisoners away. Drex was about to return to the bridge when his communications officer called out. Warlord! We are detecting incoming vessels. Drex frowned. Council peacekeepers? Ignore them. They never actually engage. They just watch and file reports. No, Warlord. The communications officer's voice was strange, almost frightened. The energy signatures. They are human. The word hung in the air like a bad smell. Every Craxian on the bridge turned to look at their leader. Drex had heard the stories about humans. Everyone had. They came from a world called Earth, a planet so dangerous that most species would die within minutes of landing there. The gravity was crushing. The atmosphere was corrosive. The animals were monsters that could kill with tooth and claw and venom. And the humans themselves were worse than anything else on their world. They were persistent predators, the stories said. They did not chase prey quickly like sensible hunters. They followed their prey slowly, steadily, for hours and days until the prey collapsed from exhaustion. Then they killed it. They bonded with other creatures, even dangerous ones. They kept wolves as pets. They rode on the backs of massive four-legged beasts. They formed emotional connections with anything and everything. And they became incredibly violent when those connections were threatened. But worst of all, they never gave up. Never. If a human decided to do something, they would keep trying until they succeeded or died. Usually both. How many ships? Drex asked. His voice was calm, but his hands had tightened into fists. 11, Warlord. Various sizes. 1 heavy cruiser, 1 destroyer, several smaller vessels. 11 ships for 12 Valari scientists? Drex shook his head. That is insane. Warlord, they are hailing us. Drex straightened his spine and nodded. Put them through. The main screen flickered and a human face appeared. It was a male, older, with gray hair and brown eyes. He did not look particularly impressive. He was smaller than a Craxian, with soft skin and no claws. But there was something in his expression that made Drex uncomfortable. A stillness, like a predator waiting to strike. Craxian vessels, the human said. His voice was flat and cold. This is Captain Nathan Cole of the United Earth Defense Force. You are holding citizens under Earth's protection. You have 60 seconds to release them and withdraw. There will be no second warning. Drex, the screen. Under Earth's protection? The Valari were not humans. They had nothing to do with Earth. What was this creature talking about? Humans have no authority here, Drex growled. These are Valari, not your kind. This is Craxian space. You have no right to interfere. The human's expression did not change. 50 seconds. Drex felt anger rising in his chest. No one spoke to a Craxian warlord like this. No one gave orders to Drex. He had conquered a dozen worlds and taken thousands of slaves. He was feared throughout the sector. You are outnumbered, human, Drex said. We have 3 warships. You have patrol boats and cargo haulers. If you attack us, you will die. 40 seconds. Krath stepped close to Drex and spoke quietly. Warlord, perhaps we should consider silence. Drex roared. He turned back to the screen. I do not fear you, human. I do not fear your death world or your persistence hunting or your emotional bonding. You are soft creatures from a soft civilization. You cannot threaten me. The human captain was quiet for a moment. Then he smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of someone who knew something that Drex did not. You misunderstand the situation, the human said. I am not threatening you. I am telling you what is going to happen. You have taken our friends. We want them back. If you do not give them back, we will take them. It is very simple. Your friends? Drex laughed. The Valari are not your friends. You barely know them. Why would you risk your lives for creatures you met a few months ago? The human's smile faded. His eyes became hard and cold, like stones at the bottom of a frozen river. Because they asked for help, he said. 10 seconds. Drex looked at his tactical display. The human ships were spreading out, taking up combat positions. They moved with a coordination that seemed almost supernatural, like they were all controlled by a single mind. He looked at his own ships. 3 Craxian raiders, built for speed and ambush, not for direct combat. His crews were fighters, but they had never faced humans before. For a moment, just a moment, Drex considered surrendering the prisoners. It would be the smart thing to do. Cut his losses and find easier prey. But Drex had not become a warlord by being smart. He had become a warlord by being strong, by never showing weakness, by crushing anyone who challenged him. All ships, he said, open fire. And in that moment, Warlord Drex sealed his fate and the fate of everyone under his command. The Craxian weapons fired first. Bright beams of energy cut through the darkness of space, aimed at the human ships that had dared to challenge them. For a brief moment, it looked like the battle might be over before it began. But the human ships were not where the Craxians expected them to be. The moment the enemy weapons charged, the human fleet scattered like a flock of birds. They moved with impossible speed and perfect coordination, each ship knowing exactly where the others would be. The Craxian beams hit nothing but empty space. Captain Nathan Cole sat in his chair on the bridge of the Resolute, watching the battle unfold on his tactical display. His face was calm, almost peaceful, as if he were watching a game rather than a fight for survival. "All ships, execute pattern Delta," he said into his communicator. "Iron Thunder, draw their fire. Nightfall, flank left. Resolute and Vigilant will protect the Valari ship. Everyone else, find your targets and make them count." The human ships responded instantly. The heavy cruiser Iron Thunder, commanded by Lisa Grant, charged straight at the Craxian formation. Her ship was the largest in the human fleet, bristling with weapons and covered in thick armor. The Craxians saw her coming and turned their guns toward her. That was exactly what Grant wanted. While the enemy focused on the Iron Thunder, the destroyer Nightfall slipped around to the left. Captain Marcus Webb stood at the front of his bridge, his eyes fixed on the enemy flagship. He was grinning like a madman. "Target their engine section," Webb ordered. "Let us see how brave they are when they cannot run away." The Nightfall's weapons fired in a precise pattern, striking the Craxian flagship's engines with surgical accuracy. Explosions rippled across the enemy ship's hull. Warning lights flashed on Drex's bridge as his engines lost power. "Return fire," Drex screamed. "Destroy that ship." But the Nightfall was already moving, dancing through space like a leaf on the wind. Webb's pilots performed maneuvers that should have been impossible, turning and spinning and accelerating in ways that would have killed most species. Humans could survive forces that would crush Craxian bodies into paste. The smaller Craxian raiders tried to help their flagship, but the human patrol ships were everywhere. The Vigilant and Steadfast worked as a pair, one drawing fire while the other attacked. The escort frigate Hammer lived up to its name, smashing into enemy shields with relentless fury. Even the civilian cargo hauler Lucky Strike joined the fight. Its mining lasers were not designed for combat, but they cut through Craxian armor just fine. The ship's owner, a retired miner named Pete Collins, whooped with joy every time he scored a hit. On the Resolute, Katie Barnes personally took control of the point defense turret. A Craxian boarding torpedo launched toward the damaged Valari ship, carrying soldiers who intended to use the scientists as hostages. Katie tracked the torpedo with steady hands and opened fire. The torpedo exploded halfway to its target. Katie allowed herself a small smile before turning her guns toward the next threat. The battle was chaos, but it was controlled chaos. The humans knew exactly what they were doing. They had trained for situations like this. They had evolved for situations like this. On his crippled flagship, Warlord Drex watched in horror as his fleet was torn apart. One of his raiders was already drifting dead in space, its crew either killed or unconscious. The second raider was trying to flee, its captain having decided that slavery was not worth dying for. "All ships retreat," Drex ordered. "Fall back and regroup." But there was nowhere to retreat to. The human ships had surrounded them, cutting off every escape route. The Iron Thunder blocked the path to open space. The Nightfall circled like a hungry predator, waiting for another chance to strike dot in the cargo hold of Drex's flagship. Commander Thylas felt the ship shudder as another explosion hit the hull. The Craxian guards who had been watching the prisoners were gone, called away to fight the fires that were spreading through the ship. Thylas looked at her crew. They were still bound, still afraid, but there was something new in their eyes. Hope. "They came," whispered young Coven. "The humans actually came." "Of course they did," Thylas said softly. They said they would. Above them, the battle reached its end. Captain Cole's voice came through on all frequencies, transmitted to every ship in the area. Craxian vessels, your fleet is destroyed. Surrender now and release the prisoners, or we will finish what we started. Drax stood alone on his burning bridge. His crew was dead or injured. His ships were broken. His pride was shattered. He had been so sure that the humans were bluffing, that they would not risk their lives for a species they barely knew. He had been wrong. We surrender, Drax said. The words tasted like poison in his mouth. The prisoners will be released. There was a moment of silence. Then Cole's voice returned, cold and hard. One of your ships is trying to run. Tell him to stop, or we will stop him ourselves. Drax looked at his tactical display. The second raider was indeed trying to slip away while the humans were focused on the flagship. For a moment, Drax considered letting it go. At least some of his people might escape. Then the nightfall turned toward the fleeing ship, and Drax knew that no one was escaping today. All ships, full stop, Drax ordered. Do as the humans say. Captain Marcus Webb brought the Nightfall alongside the surrendered flagship. He looked at the burning Craxian vessel through his viewport and shook his head. You know, he said to his crew, they really should have just let our friends go. Would have saved everyone a lot of trouble. His communications officer laughed. Since when do slavers make smart decisions? Webb grinned. Good point. Let us go get our people. Across the battlefield, human shuttles launched from every ship. Medical teams prepared their equipment. Soldiers checked their weapons, ready to board the Craxian vessels and free the prisoners. The battle had lasted 11 minutes from first shot to surrender. 3 Craxian warships against 11 human vessels. The Craxians had been bigger, more heavily armed, more experienced at combat. None of it had mattered. The humans had come for their friends, and nothing in the galaxy was going to stop them. The human shuttle docked with the Craxian flagship with a heavy clang of metal against metal. Commander Thylas heard footsteps coming down the corridor, heavy and fast. For a moment, she felt a flash of fear. She had heard stories about humans, about their strength and their violence and their terrifying homeworld. Then the door to the cargo hold burst open, and Thylas saw humans for the second time in her life. They were tall. Taller than Valari, but shorter than Craxians. They wore gray uniforms and carried weapons that looked sleek and dangerous. Their faces were strange, covered in soft skin instead of scales, with small round eyes that moved constantly, taking in everything around them. But it was not their appearance that surprised Thylas. It was their expressions. They looked worried, concerned, like they actually cared about what they might find. A female human pushed through the soldiers and knelt beside Thylas. She had kind brown eyes and dark hair pulled back from her face. A white symbol on her uniform marked her as a medical professional. I am Dr. Amy Russo, the human said, her voice gentle. You are safe now. Can you tell me where it hurts? Thylas stared at her. After everything that had happened, after the fear and the violence and the hopelessness, this simple kindness was almost too much to bear. She felt tears forming in her eyes. You came, Thylas whispered. We sent one message. One word. And you came. Amy smiled, and it was the warmest thing Thylas had ever seen. Of course we did. That is what friends do. The human medical teams moved quickly through the cargo hold, checking each Valari for injuries. They were gentle and careful, handling the scientists like precious treasures. Young Coven was crying, but they were tears of relief, not fear. Captain Nathan Cole arrived a few minutes later. He walked into the cargo hold and looked around at the rescued prisoners, his face unreadable. When his eyes met Thylas's, he gave her a small nod. Commander Thylas? I am Captain Cole. We came as fast as we could. Thylas rose to her feet on shaking legs. She was taller than Cole by half a head, but somehow the human seemed larger. There was a presence to him, a weight, like standing near a mountain. You saved us, she said. You risked your lives and your ships for 12 scientists from a species you barely know. Why? Cole tilted his head, as if the question confused him. You called for help. What else were we supposed to do? Thylas did not know how to respond to that. In her experience, the galaxy did not work that way. Species looked out for themselves. They made treaties and trade deals, calculated costs and benefits, weighed risks against rewards. They did not send 11 ships racing across space because someone they barely knew asked for help. But humans did. The next few hours passed in a blur. The Valari were transferred to the medical ship Mercy, where human doctors treated their minor injuries and made sure they were comfortable. The Craxians were taken into custody, their ships seized, their weapons confiscated. Warlord Drex was last seen being led away in restraints, his face twisted with rage and humiliation, before the human fleet departed. Captain Marcus Webb sent one final message to the fleeing Craxian raider that had escaped the battle. Tell everyone what happened here, Webb said, his voice carrying across all frequencies. Tell them what happens when you touch our friends. The message spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within days, every major species had heard the story. A single distress call from a Valari research vessel. 11 human ships arriving in response. A Craxian war fleet destroyed in minutes. The Galactic Council, which had debated for decades about whether to grant humans full membership, suddenly found their communication channels flooded with requests from smaller species. Everyone wanted to know if they could become friends with the humans. Everyone wanted that protection. Commander Thylas returned to Valari space as a hero, but she did not feel like one. She felt like someone who had glimpsed something important, something that changed everything she thought she knew about the universe. A few months later, she was appointed as the official Valari ambassador to Earth. She spent years living among humans, learning their languages and their cultures and their strange, wonderful ways. She often told the story of that day in the Andromeda Nebula. She told it to diplomats and scientists and schoolchildren, to anyone who would listen. The galaxy fears humans because they come from a world of death, she would say. They believe that the Deathworld made humans into monsters. But they are wrong. The Deathworld did not make humans cruel. It made them value life. She would pause then, letting her words sink in. Humans know how fragile life is. They know how easily it can be taken, how quickly light can become darkness. And because they know this, they protect life with everything they have. They do not calculate whether protection is worth the cost. They do not weigh risks against rewards. When someone asks for help, they answer, always, without hesitation. In later years, reporters would sometimes ask Captain Cole why he had done it, why he had risked his ship and his crew for strangers. His answer was always the same. They asked for help, he would say, looking genuinely puzzled by the question. What else were we supposed to do? The Craxians never raided near human-protected space again. Other slaver factions took note and changed their hunting grounds accordingly. A quiet understanding spread through the darker corners of the galaxy. Certain species were no longer safe targets, not because those species were dangerous themselves, but because they had made friends with the Deathworlders, and humans never abandoned their friends. Years later, Thylas was asked to summarize the lesson of the Andromeda Nebula incident for a Galactic Council report. She thought about it for a long time before writing her answer. Before that day, I believed that the galaxy was a cold and uncaring place. I believed that species survived by being strong or clever or ruthless. I believed that kindness was a weakness that evolution would eventually remove. I was wrong. The humans showed me that compassion is not weakness. It is the greatest strength of all. They came from a world that tried to kill them every day, and instead of becoming monsters, they became protectors. They became guardians. They became friends. If you want to understand humans, do not look at their weapons or their ships or their frightening homeworld. Look at what they do when someone asks for help. They answer. Always, no matter the cost. No matter the risk. No matter if the one calling is a powerful ally or a weak stranger they have barely met. That is who humans are. That is what it means to come from a death world. And that is why, of all the species in the galaxy, they are the ones I am proudest to call my friends.